Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Leaders Series, GCS Connect. We've got Simon Blake here today from Mental Health First Aid England. He is the Chief Executive and he is an expert in advising people, businesses and organisations about how to design work well to help people have better well-being, better mental health within the organisation. One of the things I really enjoyed about this conversation is linking things like well-being and mental health to productivity and therefore growth and therefore profit within a business. Because I think that's something that sometimes we as leaders can forget, in that having a happy workplace and a happy culture that is engaged and thriving helps us to grow engaged and thriving businesses. So we went into a lot of detail about those areas, particularly within the IT and the leadership kind of areas as well. And I think it was a really, really interesting conversation that you're going to really enjoy. So without any further ado, on his birthday eve, we have Simon Blake from MHFA. Thank you. Hello, Simon. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you very much. How are you?
I'm very well today. Very well today. Yeah, we were recording this on a Friday, which always cheers me up somewhat. So yeah,
it's the last day of me being 48 as well. So it's a significant day in my annual cycle.
Fantastic. So you must have been born in 1974, like myself, then.
I am. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So you're 2 months older than me. So I've got my birthday's in March. Yours is obviously in January. So yeah. So it's getting 50 is getting closer then, Simon, isn't it? So
it is. I'm now saying next year I'm 50. As of tomorrow will be my next birthday. I'm 50.
I know.
So but that's all right. I'm looking forward to it.
I've told my wife. I've set her. I've never been to Glastonbury, so I've set her the challenge of getting us Glastonbury tickets for my 50th. So I'm already winding up for my 50th birthday already. So yeah.
The last time I went was probably about 10 years ago, and I realised the last time I went, I think, was when Michael Jackson died, whenever that was,
okay, yeah.
and maybe that wasn't the last time. And I just thought then, do you know what? You've exhausted this. Don't do it to yourself again. Yeah. So, but absolutely think it's good to go. The first time I went actually was before mobile phones, and my mum and dad definitely didn't want me to go. So I was in Bath. I'd been to Greece for a week, and I phoned them from the old phone boxes, and was like,
yeah.
I know you think I'm coming home tomorrow. I'm not coming home tomorrow. I'm going to Glastonbury. I'll see you next Tuesday. Put the phone down. Just ran away.
Happy days. The wonder stroke worry of mobile phones and stuff. And I know mobile phones is obviously a thing we're going to kind of talk about, and kind of the access and that sort of thing, because it's such a big thing in like today's society, isn't it, with regards to mental health, which is obviously an area that you're so focused on and do such kind of great work within. So after that slight detour, we're kind of down to the Glastonbury tour. Let's introduce ourselves. So we've got Simon Blake today. He's the Chief Executive of Mental Health First Aid England. We'll obviously find out more about that, fantastic organisation. But he's also an OBE. So you're the first OBE we've had on the Leaders Series, Simon. So royal connections now. We haven't got our royal stamp yet for the kind of, from the royal family, from whatever. But yeah, it's great. And 20 years within the industry consulting, and 5 years within the organisation. And I think, one of the things we're really kind of interested and excited to talk to you about is at GCS, we do quite a lot of work with diversity. We do quite a lot of work with talent, and we also link that quite a lot into mental health and different people's problems around that, and how you build a strong workplace culture as a leader while bearing that in mind. And if you think about the things we've all gone through in the last 3 years, but with COVID and everything, it's put such a bigger emphasis on thinking about this and trying to deal with this within the workplace. So I'm really, for one, really excited to speak to you. I think like everyone, you struggle with things like mental health, and you don't talk about it so much, but if you're in a high pressure environment like sales, like recruitment, like being a leader, like, you change jobs, everything really, life, there are moments when you have dark moments, and I think it's good now that you can talk about this and have organisations to kind of reach out to, and companies care about it. But I think it's important just to kind of hear from someone who understands it more. But I think before we kind of go into it and discuss it in more detail, please tell me about Mental Health First Aid England, and maybe how it differs and what it kind of particularly focuses on, just so that kind of our listeners can, who are generally leaders, can understand it a bit more and place it.
Sure. So Mental Health First Aid England is a social enterprise, and we've been around for about 15 years in England, and there are programmes in 26 other countries around the world, including the other three countries within the UK, so Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and there is actually an Ireland as well. Mental health first aid as a concept first originated in Australia about 20 odd years ago, and I think it's important to remember at that time we weren't talking about mental health very much, and so the concept of mental health first aid was really about trying to use the experiences of people who'd experienced poor mental health to understand and to start conversations, trying to make sure that people like me and I think you as well, who are not mental health professionals, but we can have everyday conversations and we can recognise stigma, we can recognise signs and symptoms of poor mental health, we can know what we can do to promote positive mental health, and we can make sure that we can signpost to support. So that's sort of the principle behind Mental Health First Aid, helping everybody get better at understanding a bit about their brain, understanding a bit about mental health, understanding about mental ill health. Our focus is on workplaces. So we've worked with over 20,000 workplaces during our time as a social enterprise. And we've trained 1 in 45 of the adult population. And so our focus is on workplaces for two real reasons. One is that we spend an awful lot of time at work, and work designed well is good for us. So we often focus on the stress and strain of challenge of work, but actually work provides purpose, it provides focus, it provides success, it provides real opportunities to support our well-being. Conversely, it can add stress, it can be unreasonable, it can create all sorts of challenges. So we want to try to make workplaces better, support workplaces to promote mental health, to think of themselves as health generating organisations, and to make sure that they know that they can how to help people who do experience poor mental health and do need signposting to other sources of support. And then the other reason for training, focusing on the workplace, is, of course, we go to work. That's something we do. The skills that we learn at work, we can use in our family and in our community. So, it's and for me, I guess, having lived with having had two long-term partners who both experienced mental illness, I wish I'd learnt this 20 years ago. When I did the training, I was like, oh, okay. It moved me from awareness. And I think you talked in the introduction about, we're talking more about this, we're understanding more about it. Our awareness has been raised, but it's what are the skills we need to make sure that we're all doing that bit, because we all have a brain. We often think about mental health as either about other people or about mental illness, but mental health is an asset that all of us have. And so therefore we all need to understand it, listen to it, hear it.
And I think that's one of the things when we spoke about is not having that stigma, which is mental health. Mental health itself is that if you have mental health, you are healthy. I think that's something that you pointed out to me at the start, right?
Yeah. Well, so often when we talk about mental health, people think about illness. But if I say to you, I'm feeling really healthy at the moment, you wouldn't assume that I was talking about illness. But the really important bit of this, of course, is that you can have a diagnosed mental illness and still be doing well, be mentally healthy and mentally well, and you can not have a diagnosed mental illness and be in a bad place. It's a continuum, and we can move along that continuum, and it isn't about a diagnosed mental illness or not. It's about actually how do we, with the circumstances and our experiences, do as well as we can physically and mentally.
And does it link in, you think, like mental health or poor mental health, does that also link into poor health? Do you think, healthy body, healthy mind, is that something that you feel is, important in terms of maybe the workplace or just kind of coming into work? Because I always find, like, for myself, I feel much better for myself if, I like running, cycling, if you exercise and you feel good, then generally do you think that kind of links in together?
Yeah, absolutely. And Ruby Wax describes our body and mind as a onesie. And if you think about that, it is odd, isn't it, that we will think about our brain as separate from every other part of our body, given how brilliant our brain is. We feel the pain in our finger, but actually the pain is being experienced in our brain. So it is a onesie. And regardless of our circumstances and our experiences, good sleep, lots of water, good diet, less alcohol, less caffeine, movement, not being on our phone all the time and having space away, being outdoors, all of those sorts of things are positive for our mental health. And we need, this is, I think, the key bit. I know that, I now know that if I'm feeling overwhelmed, I might often feel it in my lower back. I know that if I'm feeling anxious, that probably I've been drinking alcohol, and so not to drink very much. I know that if I'm feeling really tired and unmotivated, I might well have been eating foods which don't react well to me, or I haven't done any exercise, or I haven't been out for a day. And it's just thinking about that awareness for ourselves. How do we listen to what our body and mind is telling us and think about actually what can I do in order to look after myself, to give my brain a rest, to inspire, to connect, to all of those sorts of things.
So when you kind of go into a business, and I'm assuming when you as an organisation go into a business, and you said you work with 20,000 businesses, who do you find the first people are that you speak to? I'm assuming it's like HR or human resources or something, or the leaders themselves. How do you enter the business?
So mental health first aid is a training program. We do consultancy as well, and we do talk. So it will vary. But the really important thing for everybody to recognise is that mental health first aid is part of a overall approach. We need leadership. We need a strong culture. There needs to be psychological safety. Line managers need to have confidence to manage well, of which conversations about mental health will be part. And everybody needs to feel as though they are included and welcome, that they are seen, valued and heard. And then you can have that mental health training, mental health first aiders that are part of an infrastructure. Employee resource groups are part of an infrastructure to include and inspire and connect people. So this is really about everybody. It's often led from HR. It can be led from employee sort of grassroots. We need to do something differently here. But the key bit about any mental health intervention is recognizing that it isn't the thing which you call mental health. It's job design. It's about can I do the job? Is there enough time in the day? Do I have the tools to do it? Am I inducted well? Do I feel like I belong and I'm valued and seen? Do I know that if I do have a problem, a mental health problem, a physical health problem, do I feel as though I can talk to somebody I can trust? Hopefully the manager. Sometimes it won't be, or might be somebody as a mental health first aid or a champion. So all of those different steps are important. And of course, this is also, so it's about our people practices and protocols and policies. It's about what we do around equity and inclusion. It's about how we support people to thrive. And it's about how we support people when they're experiencing poor health, which might be in relation to particular life events, bereavement, divorce, separation, or it might be a diagnosed mental illness. There are all sorts of elements to this, and everybody plays a part. But leaders have to believe in it.
Yeah, and that's where I kind of lent with my question, because I feel and we obviously talk a lot about kind of leaders on this in this session, and talk with leaders. And do you think one of the kind of negative connotations of mental health within the workplace is that, I'm struggling? You don't necessarily always want to say that to your boss, and maybe your boss, you might put up a veneer to say, I don't struggle because I'm the boss. So therefore, if you tell me you're struggling, I'm not going to react well to that. I think, obviously I like to kind of speak personally, is that sometimes I would put that out there as my state of mind. What are you worried about? What's your problem? What, shut up. It's just what work is like. I guess that's something that you have to work on yourself, maybe, but then you have to help people to stop those negative connotations. It happens to everyone, and everyone should be able to talk about it, right?
This is about being human, isn't it? And this is how you make it really, really simple. This is, everybody struggles at some point, whether that's with a practical task, whether that's with what's become termed as imposter syndrome, which might, of course, be a whole range of different things, whether it's something you haven't done for the first time, whether that's in a relationship, whether that's about things that are happening outside, which influence the way that you can be at work. And so that sense of I'm struggling is about how you build the culture, which says we want to help you when you need it. We want you to succeed. We want you to thrive. And of course, what we know is that stigma and fear about how people respond, or their experience of how people have responded in the past, will either enable somebody to ask for help or stop them. And those things start early, particularly. It's gendered, but we also, we don't build that. We have a culture in which asking for help is seen as absolutely not just okay, but a good thing. And that's at the heart, it seems to me, of being human. And that really is why this is both simple and complicated. But we've all got to lean into it and do everything we can to try to create the culture, and why leaders have a special place. So, if you as a leader can talk openly about either the beliefs that you have about the importance of asking for help, about the importance of community in the context of work, both in getting the work done, but also supporting people on a personal level, or whatever it is that you think is sending a signal to your staff. We want you to succeed, and we recognise that there will always be things that get in the way, and these are the ways that we want to support that.
Yeah, I think it is the sort of, and I always think back to kind of when you read about leaders as well, because I think it is a structure and a change, and you read about these leaders. Like, I'm looking at my bookcase, and I can see like Steve Jobs, Churchill, that sort of thing, like the books that you read, okay? And the book's about Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs, let's be honest, is held up as this like almost saintly figure who like changed the world and developed Apple and blah, 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 technology. And you probably, if you went back on that, who's the most influential person maybe of the last 50 years, you might say him, right? If you read that book about him as a leader, quite a lot. He was a bit of a bastard, wasn't he? Like he drove people so hard. And it sounds like he obviously achieved stuff, but he wasn't the easiest person to kind of work for. And I definitely don't think you could have gone to him with a struggle. I think his answer would have been, shut up, crack on. So I think sometimes in our culture, we're, holding up different types of leadership that maybe doesn't kind of work in the environment, in the workplace culture. Like you talked there about work design well, in the workplace culture that we want to create, a better workplace culture. Does that make sense? It's what I'm kind of thinking as you're talking.
It makes a lot of sense. I think, what people often do is say, oh, it's productivity or well-being. So it's almost like it's a balance. And of course, productivity and well-being fuel each other. It isn't a balance. I think productivity is a Bunsen burner under well-being, and well-being is a Bunsen burner under productivity.
Yeah.
And we know that we need a certain level of stress. There is an optimal level of stress at which we perform, which is, physiological and mental. We all have different stress buckets and levels and all of those sorts of things. But nobody thrives long term in a bullying or harsh environment. You might get something done, you might respond, you might be able to achieve something, but long term, I can't remember what the saying goes. I'm appalling at sayings, but if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, do it together. That sort of sense of loyalty, trust, the ability to make mistakes, the celebration of things is all part of what we need in order to do that. And those ideas that it's just work. We know and we are our whole selves. We take our whole selves to work. If there are things that are happening at work which are causing delight or challenge, that will impact on your personal life. If there are things that are happening outside of work, that will impact on there's a delight or challenge that will impact on the way that you feel about work. Now, that doesn't mean that every day is going to be rosy. It doesn't mean that even every week is going to be rosy, but over a period of time, work has to be net positive. And I've had I've been very lucky that most of my working life, I've had brilliant managers and great colleagues. And even with those brilliant managers and great colleagues, there were tough times and there were harsh conversations and there were tears and there were all sorts of things. But that's very different than the few times when I've had really, really difficult time at work where you haven't felt as though you're respected, valued, listened to. And they're very different. They're very different things, but we all need positive environments to truly do our best.
Yeah. And I think that really kind of links into what we need to drive in terms of it is a leader down situation, and the leader needs to understand that. But also something we talked about a lot in this podcast is humility. By understanding that we all suffer from this. This is something we all have problems with this. We all struggle, and we've talked a little bit before as well about the kind of the leader's role being quite lonely. In terms of the person that makes the decisions, in terms of the person that maybe doesn't have someone they can go and talk to, in terms of probably a feeling of responsibility as well, because usually as the leader, you're the person that running the business. So if you make bad decisions, then everyone's going to lose their jobs, and everyone's going to be affected by this, what in terms of, overcoming those challenges, because I guess the first thing to do if you're trying to kind of build good workplace culture is overcome the challenges for yourself. If you can overcome yourself personally, then you can kind of go out and help others, right? You can't take it all on yourself. So how do you overcome those challenges for yourself as a leader in the workplace? What do you do for yourself?
So it's really interesting, isn't it? We're all a work in progress until the day we die. I know a bit more today than I did yesterday, and I know a little bit tomorrow than I do today, and that integration about
tomorrow,
my experiences.
Simon, so you're going to be 49 tomorrow, so you're going to know
49
so much
the day
more,
when I stop getting spots and I know everything.
Exactly, that's it, done. Hopefully, you've arrived.
Finally, God, I thought that happened at 17. Maybe 49 is the day. But you also have to integrate what you learn and what you experience into the fibre of who you are. So we never overcome the challenges. But what I do know, having been a chief exec for, 15 or so years now, is that this too will pass. This feeling at 4 o'clock in the morning that is keeping me awake, will happen. That you don't have to make every decision, that you need to try to empower and enable everyone else to be making decisions. But the ones that you make need to be really well considered. And also that you'll make mistakes, and that doesn't mean that you're a bad leader. It doesn't mean that you've made bad decisions, as long as you do it with integrity, based on the best information that you've got, and that you quickly recheck what's called course correct when you get it wrong, and you, as you say, you're demonstrate humility about that, and you acknowledge and you reflect, and that enables other people within the workplace. I don't subscribe to the idea that a leader becomes a leader when they get there. I don't subscribe to the idea that you are a leader by your position. We are always in progress, and we are all leaders in a range of different ways. And just to bring that to life a little bit, if you think about your friendship groups, you will all play particular roles. And one person will be the person who always does the annual reunion. One person will be the one who sends around a WhatsApp to remind you that it's the kid's birthday. We all play different positions, and that our traditional notions of leadership need to expand if we're going to find our way through what's an increasingly messy world. We don't live in straight up and down hierarchies. We don't live in A to B in straight lines anymore. We don't even know what jobs, you particularly in the areas that you work, don't even know what the jobs are going to look like in 5 years time or 10, maybe 10 years time. So we've got to learn to just be, finding our way through and get comfort with, I guess, living with that uncomfortable. And from a neuropsychological perspective, if we're always worried about change, then we haven't got room to actually think about and experience what the change is, because we're worried about the concept of it. Whereas actually, and I remember my first chief exec job, a woman called Alice, who was absolutely brilliant, said, just make sure that you don't spend all your time worrying about the things that might happen, because when they do happen, you're going to need that energy that you would have wasted worrying about the things that might. And that's obviously, a very subtle, sort of a nuanced position, but it's a good principle.
And then you just never quite know what is going to happen anyway, because most of us would never have thought there was going to be a pandemic or something like that, which is, you can't plan for that at all. And I think that kind of leads me on to my next question, which is obviously talking about the workplace now. And when you kind of go into organizations and you're thinking about change, obviously businesses have had to implement a lot of change. And I think there's some kind of coming back now in terms of, people working more in the office and more hybrid and less from home. But I think the age of working from home and virtual and, not working in the office all the time is obviously here. So when you look at businesses and that change has been implemented, right, it isn't that is a kind of societal change. Do you see different problems coming up that you think, well, I hadn't seen that before, and I can link that back into, this change that's happened? And if you as like an organization had to change how you deal with the problems and how you train even?
Lots and lots and lots of questions in there, David. Let me just try to peel back some different layers of that onion. If you think about us as humans, we are about social connection. If you think about our brains, they routine and structure and movement and being outside, all sorts of things which work. So the office, what people often used to think about work, we took for granted the fact that we might get up and wash and get dressed and leave the house and do work, exciting work and challenging work in a different workspace, and then see people that we liked and have lunch and walk and perhaps go for a drink or to the theatre or whatever it is with them. And actually what happened on March the 16th 2020 was for lots of people that just fell away, and the first instinct in that moment was to worry about the well-being and mental health of staff working from home. And what we learned, of course, was that some people were able to manage that incredibly well and it suited them. And others really struggled with it and it didn't suit them. And of course, you would expect that. There's lots of different people. We then went through time and we realized, gosh, we can actually achieve a lot more than anybody thought that we could possibly achieve in this environment. And we got used to it. We got used to the baggy pajamas on the bottom and the smart tops and all of those sorts of things and not leaving the house. So when it opened up again, there was that bit of, actually, do you know what? I had more time. I wasn't commuting. I didn't need to do that. So it saved some money. I wasn't paying for lunch. I wasn't paying for transport, the car, etc. And then we have a cost of living crisis. And here we are, where for lots of people, there is a view that actually working from home a lot is much better. And for some people, work in the office is a lot. So for us as an organisation, we've got some people who go into the office a lot some people who come in only when told. We've got some people who are in their exit interviews who are saying, we wish you'd encouraged us to be in more or told us to be in more because we've lost some of the social connection. And we've got some people who are saying, you're asking too much. You want us to come in too often. So that's what we are now working with. And at the heart of that, I think, is, again, just recognising that when we are talking about these things, we need to understand that our brain doesn't always know what's best for us, that sometimes we can be lulled into a false sense of security, and that we do need social connection and we need to find ways to connect. But there isn't one way that fits all. And so as leaders, our job is to go, what did we have before? What do we have now? What have we lost and what have we gained? The things we've gained, how do we amplify them? The things we've lost, are we okay losing them, or do we need to do something a little bit differently? And that will, again, be different for different people. You invite me to a Zoom party on Friday night. I no longer want to come to a Zoom party on Friday night. I'm done with Zoom by Friday. But in the pandemic, because I was in connection, I was very happy to go to a Zoom call. So I just think we've got to keep having those honest conversations, but we have to do that knowing that there are things like, I jumped onto this podcast straight from another meeting. Ordinarily, in the previous life, I likely would have left that meeting, got on a bus, come to you somewhere in a studio, processed what was happening in the meeting, mentally prepared for what I was going to say here, and then made some connections as I was on my way to the next thing. So there is a relationship between movement. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to do that again, because actually a bus expense takes 30 minutes, But it may mean that I just have to say, do you know what? There has to be 15 minutes so I can walk around the block. I can do something, process that, because that's how our mind works. It works during movement. It works when we're not just constantly doing things, that we get space to think. So I don't know if that makes sense, but it's just working it through.
Yeah. I think all workplaces are working it through, aren't they? It's not a final thing, and I don't think there's a company, and every company is dealing with it differently, and I think it's very important. Just one question you talked about social connection, obviously talking about our Zoom parties. As an expert, do you feel that, would you class social connection as actually meeting someone physically, and then virtually is not so? And I think that links into the whole mobile thing. There's a lot of connections that we make on Facebook. Do you see social connection as actually we met, properly in a face-to-face connotation is better than virtually?
I don't know is the short answer. What I know is, for me, there are some times when I absolutely love the hug, the being there, the sound of laughter. When I go into the office on a day when it's very busy, so we have an anchor day once a month, and I open the door and I hear the laughter, I don't think you can get that in any other sort of environment. But I also keep in touch with people through connections on Facebook. So I know who's got married, who's had child, and that's nice to know. But but that will work. So my nephew said, "Oh, can I get somebody to come in to a lunch once?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, but we're just about to eat." And they're like, "Oh no, just mean on my phone." And that. The idea that that's somebody joining you for lunch would never have crossed my mind. But
much cheaper.
So I think what we can't do is say one is better than the other. I grew up going into the office 5 days a week. I did that. I expected to do it. I grew up without a mobile phone. I was 26 when I got a mobile phone. I handwrote my dissertation. All of those things. So the world is different, and our job, it seems to me, is to cheerlead the next generation rather than criticise, which we often do.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And our job is to try to work out for ourselves where it goes. But I would just say one other thing. The thing which does worry me is, that people may decide not to come into the office because the office doesn't feel like a safe and inclusive place, and that lets us off the hook as leaders. If people are opting out because it's not a great place, then that doesn't feel like a good solution. And then the second bit is, young professionals coming into the workplace, work is a really important part for social connection. When I first moved to London, if it had been working from home, I wouldn't know half the people I know and have helped me through the last 25, 30 years. But also, I learned from listening and watching and so going, gosh, I like the look of what they do. Oh, I overheard what they said.
Yeah, the training
and so I worry
skills transfer.
that sort of the skills transfer, the stuff. And I often have someone say, how do you know how to do that? It's like, I copied Jill. I copied somebody else. And I developed it into myself. And so that feels to me like a really important thing for us to recognize, because so much of what we learn is not by YouTube, it's by observing and by looking. So how do we, and that's not to say that the only answer is going back to the office. The answer is understanding that we've lost something and then working out the right way to try to replace it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, for me, obviously that whole kind of connotation is so, enhanced in something like the IT industry, which is obviously what GCS works in terms of, the mental health and how those people deal with it. And, there's lots of things kind of happening in that industry at the moment with the kind of huge layoffs, et cetera, with these bigger tech companies. I know we spoke about this again a little bit before, but, when you work with kind of companies that are very kind of heavy on engineers, very heavy on kind of maybe virtual workplaces, that sort of thing, do you see slightly different, connotations of mental health, different things to be worried about between different industries?
If you fall into stereotypes, of course, what you would think about is there might be more lone working, there might be more introverts, there might be a range of things, and generalizations, are sometimes helpful. So I think what we do see is sometimes see very gendered approaches, within particular industries. Right, sometimes you see, very individualized approaches. I think the key bit in all of this is recognizing that there isn't a one size fits all, and not making assumptions about what that looks like. And so
not all engineers are the same, not all IT people are the same, yeah.
But where you've got people working on their own, and you think about what do we need to do around mental health? Is it that where you do have stand-up meetings, instead of them being sat down in front of the computer, that you do walking meetings if they are good enough, in order to encourage people to get out? Is it that you find a way to use the tech to make sure that there's the connection? And how do you encourage people to move and all of those sorts of things? And where I was talking to a friend recently who's a coder who doesn't like starting until quite late, because they can do their best work as it gets late. Now that's fine, but what does that mean then for how they connect with and engage with, if they're going to bed at 2-3 o'clock in the morning, but the project manager is starting at 8-9 and wants them to be part of particular calls? How do you amend and affect that so that you're building into different circumstances? And that feels to me like the question all the time is given what we know about mental health and well-being and neuropsychology, and given what we learn about different ways that people get energy, how do we organize things in order to try to help people to be as well as they possibly can be? If you're never seeing people, how do you know whether there are changes happening? What do you need to do in your one-to-one processes? And those basics that sometimes get lost if you're in startups or if you're in a very well-established company and you're working across different bits. One-to-ones, check-ins, all of those things were put in. They are part of a system because they help to focus on productivity and well-being. We just don't always think about how to do that as well as we might.
I like your when you talked about the productivities of Bunsen burner underneath well-being, and well-being is a Bunsen burner underneath productivity, because that brings it back to the core thing of business, maybe to kind of grow and make profit and provide career opportunities for people. So when you speak to leaders, about these things, if we suggest that this is a key thing to help your business be more successful, which I assume generally is a good way to get through to leaders, if you know what I mean. What are the key pieces of advice that you give them? What do you say? These are the things we really need to work on.
It's about integrating it, isn't it, into every system and process. It's about hardwiring the humanity and the well-being of staff into the policies, the protocols, the practices, and the cultures, and that there isn't a silver bullet. That we if you start mixing my metaphors now, but this is a jigsaw puzzle in the same way that performance is a combination of managers, culture, suitable task, leadership, clarity of purpose and vision. So is well-being. Everything that you're trying to do in order to maximise the bottom line, you also have to do in order to maximise well-being if you're in for the long term. And we also know that talented people want to work for businesses that respect and understand them and trust them, and they have autonomy and flexibility where it sits. So it's a win-win. That there isn't this. And I guess ultimately, all the research shows that for every pound that you invest in mental health, you save £5.30. So and the Deloitte research shows that each year in the UK business, poor mental health costs UK business £56 billion in absenteeism, presenteeism, leavism, and always on culture. So doing nothing isn't an option. Investing upfront to create a positive culture and prevent mental ill health is far more effective and a much better investment than when it costs you money. And it may not be obvious because people we know often don't say that they were off because of poor mental health, because of fear of stigma. So it may not be showing up as mental health, but if you're not doing much, there will be. And the other bit in it, just to be really, really explicit, because people often assume that the majority of the cost is in people not being at work. A significant amount of the cost is at people being at work when they shouldn't be. And actually they're unwell, shouldn't be at work, less productive. That's where significant amount of that cost comes in. So it's really important to get under the skin and to think about it. And an indicator that you're doing a good job, of course, might be an increase in people reporting that it's mental health that's impacting on them, because you're building a culture in which it's comfortable to do so. Then your job is to think, how do we remove those stressors where we possibly can? And there's a workplace health report which is out this week, which shows that 61% of people just said they're really tired. They're really tired, and that's impacting on productivity. So you started talking about the last 3 years. Real life can be tiring for people. And then we've had COVID, pandemic, and now going immediately into a cost of living crisis, which of course impacts those who are already experiencing inequalities. It doesn't impact us all equally, even though it probably does impact all of us.
I think that's really good. I think, putting it front and center. What was the thing you said, how you start your conversations? I would say you had a good line for it.
The first question on our one-to-one form, which we always ask, is how are you and what are you doing to look after yourself? Right. And that question, of course, there will all be different answers. But David, if you were my manager and for 3 months in a row, I say to you, I've been walking the dog, I've been running, I've been exercising, I'm doing well. And then suddenly I say to you, I haven't really done anything the last month. I've just been really tired. It gives you the opportunity to say, the last, normally you say X, Y, and Z. Is there anything that we need to worry about? And so it doesn't matter quite what the question is. The reason that we ask that specific question is we know that when people are unwell, looking after themselves is one of the first things that drops off. Doing things that they enjoy, that brings them joy. And so that's why we do it. We're actually, in March, we'll be producing some guidance, which we can send you the link to, which has some more information about that, which we can send and you can circulate.
we will definitely be kind of putting up the links around the organisation and how you can get involved with the organisation and how you can, as part of this, and the training obviously that you can do to actually involved with the organisation and taking out the message. I think it's a really, really important thing for companies and for individuals to understand what resources are on offer. And I think, just from this conversation, you can see what an important part of what we do is. And I think people will listen to it and realise, we make all these mistakes. I do all these things kind of wrong, and I guess in some ways that's pleasing in some ways, isn't it? That you look at businesses, you work with people, that this is what happens in workplaces. The thing I was going to kind of add to this is obviously as a recruiter, I know how important it is. Two things: when you're hiring for a company, if you can see things like Glassdoor, things from interviews, just walking around the offices, that it's a happy, thriving, collaborative, good workplace culture, straight away the person is much more interested in working for that company than that company. I always talk to clients how important the interview is. Do the interview right, and you're like 90% of the way there to the person taking the job. The second thing is obviously we talk to people that leave, and it's generally not, obviously we always go past money motivations. So if I say to you why you don't want to leave, your first question will be, well, I want more money, right? That's, I'm earning 40, I want to have 45. My next question will be, well, if your company you work for offered you 45, which could happen, then would you stay at the company you work at? Like, generally, quite a lot. They don't say yes, but they don't say no. And in recruitment, it's very much a kind of a prioritization thing, right? Who is really motivated to leave? And generally, the motivations to leave are around company culture. They are around being listened to. It's a bit of feeling engaged by the company. So you talked about leavism there, and obviously, saving a business. I see this all the time, that if you haven't got your workplace culture right, and it's never perfect, and there are always other things, but if you haven't got it right, it will affect your business and your ability to hire and grow, adversely, right? And you must see this yourself all the time, but I definitely see it all the time with businesses.
Absolutely, and I think that it's a real fine balance, isn't it? Because you also want, as a leader, certainly I want to know the limitations within a company. We're a small-ish organisation, so we're never going to be able to have great succession plans for lots of people. So what are the opportunities that you can develop in the organisation? But also, how do you help people to be developing themselves so that they can move on? Because you also, life is about adventure, right? And that includes organisations, but you don't want to be losing people too soon. There's the sweet spot within that. But I think it's about all of it, isn't it? It's about how, for me, people often talk about work-life balance, and that and for me, it's about, does my life feel balanced? Of which pay is one bit of it, but it's also, have I got the time and space to do the things at work, to do things outside of work? Is it driven by purpose? So I think we have to be careful when we say work-life balance, as if work isn't part of our life. Work is a really important part of our life. It will influence our life a lot, whether we are enjoying it or not. It's a really, net positive influence if we get it right. And so always think about a balanced life which work fits into. And I think at the heart of what's happened through COVID, I do think that's what's happened when people are saying, I want to work from home. What that means, I have more freedom. I had more control over what was happening and how it was happening. And so often we use shorthand around things. And I think if you say to people, just talk to me a little bit more about what is it that is at home, and say, well, I've got this and I can do that and I can do Y. Because none of us really want to stay at home just because Amazon might be dropping a parcel off. But it might be symbolic of what it meant for us in that time. So I think that's where we might need to have braver conversations and just go, let's unpick this a little bit in order to determine the future and where we want to go.
And when we talk about work-life balance, obviously one of the things that's really important at the moment. You know, you think about kind of layoffs, particularly within the IT industry, is that that's the point where then your work-life balance is totally upset, and then you haven't got work-life balance because you haven't got work, and we see that. You know, we see that a lot. I think recruitment can work more closely on its concern for people when they're working with that, because obviously then you're in a very stressful situation. I've been in that position myself when the job hasn't worked out, and then you're looking for another job, and it's incredibly stressful. It's incredibly harmful to your mental health, isn't it?
Well, and I mean, I think it's like so many things, isn't it, that we internalize and interpret. So there will be lots of things going on. One is, can I pay my rent? So when we're having the conversation about a role no longer being available or changes, that's often survival. What's going to happen to me? And then why me? Rejection, all of those sorts of things. So I think we so often deal with the facts, and it's actually how do you engage with what it creates in terms of feeling and everything that comes up for us in those moments. So again, I guess it just, for me, I would just say in that our experience of being human in that process, it is a reasonable response for us to feel worried, anxious, stressed about it. So how we're helped through that is incredibly important. What we mustn't do is pathologize what is a usual response. It is our body and brain responding to stimuli, which can feel challenging. So it's all about being human, isn't it, and doing it as well as we can.
Yeah, exactly, and listening. So, today, Simon, I think we've kind of gone through so much, with regards to your experience and your knowledge and what you kind of bring and what your organisation does. My last question really is, what are your key priorities for the year ahead? Now you're 49. What are you really looking to kind of achieve within your business and yourself?
I mean, our core focus, our mission is to train 1 in 10 of the adult population, because we believe that will create the culture change that we need in order to have communities which care, know, can signpost and access support. So that's sort of our North Star organisationally. That's within a much wider context. For me, the overarching passion for this is about building cultures in which we know and understand about mental health. We are able to connect with our emotions and our emotionality and our understanding, and build lives in which we can thrive, even in the tough sort of times. And I think that mental health literacy, we're only really at the start of this conversation. For so many of us, mental health has been shrouded in stigma or mystery or lack of understanding and about other people. And actually, for me, that real sense, and Mental Health First Aid England paying a contribution to an overall drive to improve mental health literacy, so that we can all take personal accountability, we can take organisational responsibility, and create societal change where we can just be human a bit better, where we recognise the impact of prejudice and discrimination, etc. So that's my North Star, really. Let's get better at being human and normalising those bits and helping each other as we navigate our muddle. I mean, as I said to you at the start, by 17, I thought I was going to understand it or stop getting spots. What I've learned over the last 32 years is you muddle through the best you can.
That's right.
And we all need to work alongside each other with that.
I always joke that sometimes things happen and say, "They didn't teach me this in CEO school," and obviously there is no CEO school. And I'm like, I don't really know what to do about this particular situation. But you have to kind of use your experience and use your kind of networks and your advisors and your team to try and make the best possible decision. And I guess that's what you do in life, isn't it? But it's been a great conversation today, Simon. I know that GCS as an organisation is going to be working much more closely with you as an organisation and try and get some of our people to kind of become these trainers that we spoke about. And we will obviously post the information up on our socials, etc., so that other people who want to get involved can be. Is there an easy way, Simon, just to kind of, as we finish off, a little advert for you, an easy way that someone could kind of reach out and become more involved in the organisation within Mental Health First Aid England?
Yeah, all of the information is on our website, which is mhfaengland.org, and on LinkedIn, Mental Health First Aid England. Do have a look on the website. There's easy contact numbers there, and all the information that you need. And I guess my sort of plea really to everybody is, don't think that there will become a good time to do this. The time, if you haven't already started, is now. That we know that we're operating in uncertain times, and it's small steps. It doesn't have to be the whole shebang. But we can't wait for the perfect moment, because there won't be a perfect moment. And anything that we can do to help as a social enterprise, absolutely do our best to do through the training things. But all the information, mhfaengland.org. When you do the MHFA, you have to say in your head, mental health first aid. Otherwise, you might well get the letters the wrong way round.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, I'm sure that we'll put the link in there as well. But Simon, thank you very much for your time today, and enjoy your birthday.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.